Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next speaker, Spyridon Maniotis, presenting the topic, Regulatory Compliance as a DevOps Enabler.
Hello everybody. Welcome to the session, Compliance as a DevOps Enabler. I'll give you a little bit of intro of myself. Well, there's a reason why you see the banks here. You gotta say it in my intro. Oh, he's missing the technical issue. Lovely. So I like to call myself a DevOps advisor. Actually, it's been many years I work in the DevOps industry. I'm currently based in London. I'm a management consultant. Close to 13 years of DevOps experience, both from consulting as well as from the industry. I have worked with British, Nordic and French financial service institutions, amongst others. I just refer to banks here. I've done compliance work with all of this, going from the ECB to the EBA and the local FCAs in the Nordics. And having that, I've published a book a year and a half ago that is called Industrializing Financial Services with DevOps. Moving to the content of the session. So basically, I'll start with a personal story on how I got involved with compliance, and eventually that built my DevOps career in essence. Then I'm going to speak a little bit about the anatomy of the regulatory control, actually, which is the main actor of this session. I'll speak about two concepts that are very important when you address regulatory demand into the software development lifecycle. One is the multi-speed and relevance concept of organizations. I'm using the example of banking because I'm coming from the financial service industry. That's the one that can relate the most to, but I'm sure you can relate to your industries. I'm going to speak about the criticality of your portfolio, actually, how that defines the extent to which you apply compliance. And I'm going to bring two small frameworks. One is called compliance as code, and the other one, how you conceptualize the implementation of a control. Ending, I'm going to give you a little bit of intel actually on what to be mindful on when you design compliance controls. So starting with a little bit of a disclaimer, we focus on the software development lifecycle actually. We don't speak physical compliance of buildings, we don't speak PCI, GDPR, even though I know that SDLC controls can spam into other regulatory demands. So basically, it is a software development lifecycle, which normally in large organizations is part of a larger IT security framework, as it is normally called. So, a little bit of a story of myself is 2015, November. I work in the largest Nordic bank. I'm based in the Nordics. Actually, the bank happens that it's globally systemically important back in the day. And I'm head of what we did call engineering tools. A brand new team, only 5 months around. We read about DevOps, is 9 years ago, actually. We read about DevOps, wanted to establish a team in markets technology, but it was to enable DevOps capabilities. It was basically DevOps tooling. And one afternoon, my CIO, we were demarcated into markets, asset management, retail banking, and so on. My CIO from markets tells me to go by his desk, and he tells me, I'm going to send you an email. There is a document, there is an inspection report, read it, and in the afternoon, you're going to be invited in a meeting to represent us. And then I go at my desk actually and I see a report that says European Central Bank in the front page, and I'm like a little bit scared what this is about. And it was written inspection in IT operations. So basically it was a 66 pages document with what the European Central Bank found when they came to inspect us. I just read it very fast. I could relate to it actually, so I can tell they've done a really good job. What they found, it was exactly where the organization is average it was. And then I go into that meeting, and then in that meeting I'll be told that I'm to head the stream as a program manager. And the reason was I was responsible also to establish this DevOps tooling team, as it used to be called almost back in the day, and lead the stream on responding from a market's perspective into that demand. So basically what have they discovered is not exhaustive, but it's a little bit all of this. We were lacking test automation, we were lacking segregation of test environments, a lot of manual interventions on build and deploy, we did not register on the incidents, we were not top of SLAs, all the good stuff you would expect a bureaucratic bank to look like 9 years ago. And the most interesting thing is the last sentence. So basically in the last sentence they were stating that their institution, referring to the ECB, is not confident that we can provide reliable and secure services to our clients and the society. And the most important thing, it was the last bit, that we had inadequate capabilities for our size. So we were globally systemically important. And why I'm saying that is we had to get it done, so we had to respond. It wasn't a compliance report that you just leave on the side and you omit. So what we have done a little bit, real fast. Again, not exhaustive. We automate a lot of things around CI/CD pipelines, a lot of things around quality assurance. We got on top of RT service management, started decoupling the portfolio to minimize dependencies and be able to respond to changes and incidents faster and everything. It took around 2 to 3 years actually to get into the state that they have accepted evidence-based that we had progress and we deliver on commitments. And now the interesting thing with this one is that business had its own priorities, new functionality, revenue, money is a bank actually, right? Revenue is king, cost income ratio is what drives everything, let's be honest. And most thought that ECB doesn't know what they talk about, they were resistant about it actually, so we won't deliver new functionality, we're gonna lose business, our competitors are growing and everything. And then there was another side of the organization who thought we were blessed, in essence. And the reality is that we were blessed that they came around. And it's primarily for 3 reasons why that happened. Having the ECB around gave us money. Okay, we changed PowerPoint version, so that's a little bit sloppy. Money prioritization to get it done. So funding, prioritization, and then deadlines. And we had some really good brains in the place in that time, and basically that has resulted on us getting together and purely taking advantage of the compliance dedicated money to establish those capabilities on an enterprise level. That's a little bit of story of my life. That's how I really started doing DevOps on an enterprise level, and then I continue for close to 10 years now. Now, I would like to speak a little bit about the anatomy of the regulatory control. So basically, when you have a regulator inside and they're looking at your software development lifecycle, normally they tell you you need to design and implement certain controls. Read a little bit. This is taken. It is a little bit of an average from the EBA, the ECB, and the British FCA. So basically, it says that it is a policy, methodology, or procedures that shows you have adequate means in your organization so you can use your IT assets as intended. Can you raise your hand if it does make sense to you? So you're in IT and you get a report and it says you need to design such a thing. Does it really make sense? It doesn't, right? So basically, what I have done through the time is I have manipulated it, providing a definition that was accepted by the regulations, and that's my own definition actually. So it is a mechanism to ensure minimum viable adoption and minimum viable adherence, where you either implement DevOps capabilities from the ground or where you accelerate DevOps adoption which is already in the making. And to give you a little bit of definition, so minimum viable adherence means to adhere to a capability, let's say static code analysis, adoption, I'm sorry. Minimum viable adherence means that you adhere to the policy that is built in the capability, and then basically you should see a DevOps control equalizing a DevOps capability. So basically, you flip the definition and the interpretation upside down, and you take advantage of it, enabling a capability while ensuring it makes you compliant. Now, I brought a little bit the anatomy here to give you a sense. So for me, that's taken from my book actually. I'm not here to advertise my book, but it happens that the frameworks are from there. So basically, I have the full anatomy of how I see a DevOps control to be designed, and this is a critical path for regression test of an application. So that's a capability. You need to regression test in every release your critical path. As you can see, it's very rich actually, and it covers a lot of areas. I won't stand in all of them, but I want to speak about 4 specific ones that I see the industry usually omitting. So one is the value proposition. So what do we do it? And you remember that we changed the old compliance language to something more modern. So basically, you need to explain to people why it is happening, avoiding the compliance flavor of it. So it's not because the European Central Bank is asking us, but because we want to deliver high quality services out there. Second one is the origin. So you need to tell them where it's coming from. So they don't think it's coming from their boss or somewhere up in the hierarchy who doesn't know what happens in the organization. It needs to be backed up with a little bit of authority. That helps in the future to trace as well, because if you're a globally systemically important financial service institution, you're under too many regulatory requirements from different bodies, and you need to be able to trace them on who do you respond with what. I'm going to talk a little bit in the last slide about it. Then is metrics and frequency. So basically, how often does this control apply to the software development lifecycle? There's things that is one-off, there's things that are based on continuity actually, and they go together with your release cycles in every single release. And last but not least, what is the relevance to your portfolio? So is this control applicable to everybody? Is it mandatory for everybody? So what distinguishes people that they need to have it in place and people that they can just omit it? Going a little bit further, now I would like to talk about the concept of multi-speeds and relevance, which is very important. I guess an example from banking, but for obvious reasons. So it is important to understand these two concepts when you adopt DevOps, including when you do regulatory work. So basically, what is relevant for one area that is not relevant to another area for different reasons. I'm going to bring an example, and how you define different speeds in your organization. It's not the whole organization with the same speed. They're not all to achieve the same targets at the same time, if they ever do. It's very important to understand the generation of these two mechanisms. So some are being constructed naturally, and natural primarily is the business context and the regulatory demand. So what the business owners of the application work, and who is regulating actually those applications. And the second one is intentionally, which is actually ambitions and ability. This is smart people got together in the same team and they just push the boundaries. Nobody really told them they need to release daily, but they can do it. And then there's certain characteristics that can demarcate your portfolio in different speeds and relevance. This is some of them, and regulatory context is the topic of today. So if I may give you a little bit of an example, imagine this is a bank, and that's an actual example from a bank. Again, sorry for the misformatting here. So a bank is a situation, it has sub-situations. I was placed here in capital markets. That's why the examples for markets and no markets better than retail banking. We did have the front office trading, really high availability numbers, really big demand actually for changes, big revenue for the firm, really demanding. I don't know if you have worked with traders, actually really demanding people, actually really aggressive. And then you have middle office, but you can move a little bit slower. It happens mostly after midnight. It can be batch oriented. It doesn't really go through big changes. So you can see here that we have two different speeds. A real time, that I'm giving an order, trade Tesla stocks now, and then another activity that happens at the end. So all the trades come in, there's some mathematical formulas and calculate the risk exposure of the bank. So real time is something that can wait later. So two different speeds and two different scenarios in here. And as you can guess, when it comes into regulatory work, the top priority comes to front office trading, because that's the one that brings most of the revenue. That's the one that goes through most of the changes. That's the one that is mostly client facing. Now you gotta tell me, there's a lot of risk calculations happening here, but it's where it is in this is called the trade life cycle. It's got more steps in it. The earlier you're in the trade life cycle, the more demanding it is for you. So basically, what do we understand from this example? Not everybody is going to move with the same speed when it comes into regulatory demand, and nobody needs to adhere to the same requirements actually, because they're not made to. And this is very important, because when you respond to your regulator, they ask you for a response, and then they keep you accountable for this response. You need to tell them. Normally banks do it in waves. Actually, I've done it for 3 European banks so far, not alone obviously, I've been involved. You do it in waves, and you need to explain them which applications they're going to go in the first waves, which in the next ones, and which they won't be in scope, and they need to approve this scope actually. So that's very important. Another mechanism is the criticality of the portfolio. Normally in a large institution, you're going to see 4 different levels of criticality. There's what we call mission critical and systemically critical, and especially if you're globally systemically or regionally systemically or nationally systemically, these are super important ones. If they are down, they cause an issue to the daily economy. So if you're the largest payments provider in the Nordics and your service is down, you can't push payments through in the Nordics. It can have massive economic impact actually for the society. The second one is business critical ones. They are still important, not that important though, but they have a distinct position in the business cycle of a bank. In my example, risk reporting is one of them. Then you have the ones that are highly available. They need to be available enough, but not to the extreme, right? When invoicing is one example, so sending invoices to your clients after you receive payments. And then you have what you call standard. As simplified actually can be more complex, and these are the ones that are used internally. Let's say business intelligence tools by your business users. Nobody really cares if it is down. It's your business people that they won't be able to predict revenue for the next month. It doesn't have an impact on the society. What you need to look into here when you do the prioritization is what is the potential consequence from the regulatory impact perspective. The top one, the regulator can tell you we can take your license away. They will never do it actually, because if you're systemically important, they can stop your operations. So you're gonna end up like with Lehman Brothers in the global economy. There are fines, definitely, and the very important one that is called capital requirements. So if they feel your business is too risky, they're going to ask you to improve your core tier 1 ratio, which basically in bank says how much capital you have aside to be able to operate for 3 months with zero income. So it can really have an impact on your balance sheet on top of your reputation. On the next ones, probably you're going to get some fines, though if you do demonstrate sufficient progress based on the promises, probably you're going to avoid them. Though there are many examples of US banks actually throughout the years that got too many fines, and no material impact is for the standard ones, right? Another important target is the availability. So for how long it should be up and running the service, and then how fast it has to be restored when it is down. Again, it goes into waves actually. Normally the waves of restoration. So if we have the data centers of, let's say, you are in a hybrid cloud setup, none bank is running in the cloud apart from the neobanks, and because in institutional ones it's really hybrid. So if all the data centers of the country go down, which applications need to come first alive so the economy can keep moving? So two examples here, two frameworks, sorry, here. One is to understand the speeds, who is moving fast actually, and who is going to move faster in your organization, what is relevant to whom. Right, technology dictates a lot actually on what you can do in DevOps. And in the mainframe applications, you can be really so flexible as in the cloud native one. And then definitely the criticality from a regulatory perspective, as well as from an availability and restoration perspective of the economy. Now, getting a little bit, I know it's theoretical, but this is mostly what organizations struggle to understand, to be honest. And above, sorry again for the bad animations. So basically below the yellow line, it was supposed to be into highly available. Those ones will come really late in the process, if ever. That was the meaning of it. So becoming a little bit more practical, this is a framework that I have designed, and it's not what I'm doing in the afternoon because I don't have time. That's I'm really doing with my clients actually. It's work I do with my clients. And this framework, sorry for the sloppiness actually. So what happened, we changed laptops and we're having compatible Microsoft versions of PowerPoint. So what it tells you to begin with is you need to look into your entire value stream engineering on how to design and embed control. So since you have an idea to generate value in an organization till the value really ends to your end client or your end business user, you need to look into the controls you want to embed. There's a lot of foundation establishment that you have to do. I have some examples here. As we talked about criticality, the stuff around threat modeling, the stuff about controls inventory. So basically make sure that you lay down a very solid foundation that then you can build on top. It is super important to have a service model in place. So building them, it's mostly security tools there, but it can be any technological asset of DevOps. So basically it's very important to embed them into the technology, so whoever consumes the technology consumes these controls out of the box as well, for automation, developer experience, and many other reasons. And then it is very important to demarcate them across the continuity cycles of your software development lifecycle, going from development to a service being in production and monitored and logged, and tactically embed them across it. Normally you would like to do a little bit of shift left, so you do things as early as possible, shift left security, shift left quality, shift left operations, to smoothen the path to the right. But then definitely invest a lot on automating anything that is to the right. Things like change requests, incident management, self-healing, auto-healing. So basically these are capabilities that end up being controls, ensuring that you can release fast, fail fast, recover fast, report into SLA's impact when you have issues fast. And they do count as controls actually from a regulatory perspective. And then I propose a set of metrics that they go a little bit outside the typical DORA metrics you would use, the 4 ones that every company is using, or the DORA ones but a little bit manipulated, focusing on speed. You need to make them relevant to compliance. So one thing is to assess the impact that compliance has to your velocities. Then when you start adopting controls, you gotta slow down at the beginning. You need to be able to calculate in monetary terms as well when that investment will start paying off. Because essentially you're going to spend some time to enable things, and then you're going to move faster in the future. The level of control orchestration, so how automated the whole thing is. Essentially you want to end up in almost fully event-driven setup across your SDLC, at least for the modern applications. So basically zero touch to the extent possible. The level of auto remediation, So how fast you can remediate things won't be working. So right, you don't want people to manually do things, right? You need to have a way to remediate things very fast. So we identified X number of vulnerabilities. Let's say 55% of this X was remediated automatically. Is very important. Developer autonomy. Nobody wants to slow developers down. I don't like the word developer, but it's everybody who is a stakeholder in the DevOps value stream. But giving people the autonomy without really restricting them when implementing controls. There's many reasons for that. One is that you don't really know their application, you don't really know their stack, so you need to be able to give them the authority to manipulate the controls a little bit to fit into what they're discussing with the product owners. Actually, do not red tape everybody. Well, you have to do it in certain cases, but you need to leave some autonomy which is actually aligned. I call it aligned autonomy in my book. So allow them to be autonomous, but at the same time make sure that they are all aligned. And then policy engineering. So you need to bake in the policies in an engineered way. You don't want big Confluence pages that people go and read policies, and what they're gonna do. It should be the events in the tooling itself, actually in your service model, dictating what happens, dictating in brackets. So 4 bits to summarize it. End-to-end value stream engineering perspective. I don't know if you do value stream engineering in your organizations. So what I'm saying, I have this example, like you need to be able to follow the controls with your finger, and if you stop somewhere, something is wrong because you break the flow of compliance. Service model perspective, bake them into the technology in an agnostic way, if possible. Make sure you do both a solid foundation as well as enable capabilities, which is very important, and then be a little bit creative on how you measure yourself. And of course, when it comes to measuring yourself, it has to do a lot with the evidence at the same time. Now, a little bit of a practical example here. So this is, let's take one example, and we say that we have an open source scanning policy that we want to bake in the CI/CD pipeline. There's certain input and output that you need to define in order to ensure what you would call control completeness, right? So you have everything you need. Firstly, you need to define the logic. So basically, what is the logic of the policy? That can depend on many different parameters. One is the programming language you're using. Then what is the acceptable velocity? How long should that run to? Actually, I mean, if you do have a velocity of 15 minutes for your build time, as an example, it's not acceptable that this is running more than 5, let's say. Because if it takes like 33% of your build cycle, then it doesn't leave enough for the rest. Very important to define that. Thresholds, normally you will go for minor, medium, and major on this one. I've seen up to 4 in that example. Violation management. So if you violated, what happens? Do you fail the build? Do you need the product owner to sign off a build that is passing but it has vulnerabilities, and then take them accountable, that and create an internal, let's say, audit remark that I know I have vulnerabilities but I need to go in production. You need to align it to all this logic. The triggering event. So what is triggering it? Mostly in the CI is going to build the build, and then in which tooling this is baked in. And if you cannot bake the policy in a tool, something you've done wrong. I haven't come across any policy actually that it cannot be built in a tool. And I have a proposal later today that if you cannot automate a process, a control, sorry, then you should probably omit it. You don't want to slow down your organization. And then all these are running, in that example, in the build process, and then you have some output, pass and fail, evidence, super important. If you can't prove you're doing it, you're not doing it. And that's not just a saying in life, it's a saying from the regulator, just prove me that you're doing what you're telling me you're doing. The next orchestrating event, so basically this event, its success, should trigger another event. Its failure should stop everything in a black and white scenario. But you need to define, once I'm passing this one, what is next? And then the remediation guidelines in the form of automation. So basically, I have a client at the moment actually that will work together on auto remediation. They don't want people to read Confluence pages anymore. They want to take advantage of AI solutions actually, and smart things that certain developers have done, and create a repository that people can auto remediate things, as an example. Now a little bit of guidelines built in the tech stack. If it's outside this tech stack, you've done something really wrong. Provide compliance as code frameworks like the one I saw before, and you did double click in all the capabilities that they were there. Enable it once and consume it many times, right? And this is a little bit of a tactic. So if some people have done some smart things in the organization, just borrow them with pride, in essence, right? And make them available to others. The reusability is super important. Avoid the hard coding. You need to be able to adjust the controls because your software development lifecycle will adjust, your platform will modernize, you gotta decouple, I don't know what you gotta do, you would like to decommission it in an easy way. Really make it dynamic, avoid the hard coding. And I have a great example that I want you to avoid that I see in most of the organization, and it's really driving bad behavior across controls. Tactical embodiment. So basically when you look into your software development lifecycle, you need to be smart on where to embed them. Depending on the intelligence you apply in your software development lifecycle, especially when you have release orchestration, but there's different applications running at different speeds and they need to come together at some point. It's really important how you do it in an intelligent way. Allow prototyping in local developer environments. So give them early chance to test, to test what they're gonna get. Don't get them surprised when they start using the tooling as a common team, right? Sandboxing, if you probably do, a lot of the controls you can enable them, not in great magnitude in certain cases, low due to technological limitations, but warn them already in advance of what they should expect. Reference architectures is really important, actually, especially in public cloud context, at least in financial services. We do have several reference architectures that by default enable controls. Of course, you need to twist and tickle them in certain cases. And then consolidate all the evidence as part of a production readiness review. So I'm borrowing the definition from Google, and I like it a lot. That's the one I'm using. I'm not using the ITIL one. So when you validate that a service is ready to go to production or is ready to incrementally deploy changes in production, consolidate dynamically all this evidence, and then basically get a tool that has a baked-in logic to decide whether you can go to production or not. And leave the only manual step, your product owner, to sign off, because I know that for big financial service institutions, the regulator wants to see the name of the one who approved the release. It's a requirement, unfortunately. But again, you can do it very fast in that context as well. A little bit of guidelines on these, too many actually. So one is to make them technology agnostic, because you gotta change technologies. I can tell you now that all the clients in my firm that we have, they are moving towards GitLab and GitHub. Big migrations from Jenkins, Bamboo, Azure DevOps, right? And they now say, okay, we did hard code things, how should we do it in a smart way now? So don't hard code them, you're gonna need them in the future to be flexible. Collect the initial baseline, right? Find a way to know who is where, so you can, because as I said, compliance, yes, but we won't take advantage of it. We want to excel the organization. So as you collect evidence of adoption and adherence, you're also collecting evidence of advancements on DevOps. So you need to go back and be able to justify the investment, because normally that the whole response will be backed up by a business case. You might write it one off in the balance sheet of the organization, or you might allocate specific money every quarter or every 6 months. I don't know what your QBR or annual review process is, but you'll have to go back to that baseline and say, okay, I gave you $10. You told me I'm going to become compliant and move faster at the same time. How can you prove that? At least that's how big financial service institutions work, especially in our era. The money is not really growing in the trees. Descope it if automation is a challenge. And I had that, actually, I can tell you the story when I was working at Danske Bank. I can tell the name, right? I mean, it's only good stories. We got the direction from our CTO, actually, that if you cannot automate the control, descope it and leave it with me and the COO to speak with the Danish FSA and tell them that we understand what you want, but you can't slow me down because I'm adding value to the economy. So there's also that in my book. If you read the final accountable for all this is the COO in essence. So it can go up till there if you need to have an intelligent and productive dialogue on what is acceptable and possible as well. Dynamic evidence generation, definitely. You don't want to manipulate them at all, actually. So really dynamic, you need to be able to populate evidence that tell you what you need without anybody touching them. And in some cases, a requirement. Involve your business partners. It's their applications, it's their money, it's their client, it's not yours. Technology is an enabler in essence. So don't take them out of the equation, because I've heard a lot of nasty words from business people that they haven't been involved in such work, and saying that you bloody IT want to take me out of business in essence with all these things you're planning. Who gave you the green light? And you gotta face that, especially from areas that are really revenue aggressive, because in certain cases you will have to down prioritize new features and expanding to new markets or in the existing market to become compliant. So they need to be part of the game actually, and they need to back you up in certain cases, so they can be a good ally to have. Bandwagon your regulators. That's another important one. I mentioned it before. Normally, I mean, the biggest client that we have now at Capco, my company, it's, I can tell you actually, everybody knows, it's HSBC. HSBC is regulated all over the place. Actually, they need to do regulatory bandwagoning. So they need to put the main regulator in front. And we've done the same at the Nordics when I was at Nordea actually. And then bandwagon the others behind, the less powerful, to put it that way. And say, I'm going to respond to you, mate. You're the strongest one. And then the rest of you see what I'm going to respond to him and just align with each other. I know it's not that easy in every context. It was rather easy in the Nordics because it's a smaller area, geographical area. But it's very important because in certain cases you're going to realize that you have conflicting requirements coming your way. The one is asking for one thing, the other one is asking for another thing. You can't please them both equally. Make policies invisible but transparent. So make sure, we had this saying in the Nordics actually, make developers to follow policy without realizing they're following it. And this is where you really succeeded with compliance work, but make them transparent. It's different mechanisms you can make them transparent and get them to contribute to what a good policy will look like, but they need to know how it was designed. So they need to be part of, if you remember the autonomy, they need to be part of designing the autonomy, in essence. The people that are to be the end consumers. Engage your broad DevOps ecosystem, business people, vendors, everybody actually. Because what you're gonna realize in essence, and that is what I've been discussing with a client of mine last week actually, is the second largest British bank. And I told them they want to shift their DevOps operating model, and I was saying some things is within your yard, some are not in your yard actually. I can make you a proposal for what is not in your yard. So you need to find people that are responsible across the value stream and bring them together. Because you might want to do certain things, but maybe your central hosting team won't allow you to do it, and you're gonna be planning fancy things that eventually are not easy or acceptable at all. And bring your regulator close, but not too close. Actually, and you need to keep them updated. You need to keep them entertained. Actually, show them you have progress. But don't bring them too close. I have a lot of tricks in my book. Again, I'm referring to it, but I'm not here to sell it. As an example, right? That don't bring them really close. Don't ask a lot of questions. Don't ask stupid questions. Pretend in some cases you don't understand what they want. Because if you go, for instance, and ask for details of what they want, they're gonna make the requirements extremely tough. They're gonna come with the worst case scenario. And in a lot of cases, if not in all cases, we know that the regulators are always a little bit further behind the industry. So they even don't understand certain things you do. I had actually, this is an amazing one. When I was at Danske Bank, we had the FSA, standing for Financial Stabilization Authority in Denmark, sending their findings. They used to call deployments installations. That shows you that in certain cases are really behind. They don't even use the same dictionary you use. So keep them close, show them progress, but not too close. They don't really need to know everything. And then the last one, which is the beginning of all the nightmares of compliance, actually, at least in my experience, is do not hard code segregation of duties. That's the biggest disaster of compliance, actually. It's not the early 2000s anymore. You can segregate duties and tasks in your organization if you are that big and it is needed in a dynamic, intelligent way, rather than building walls between your organization. Because if you build walls between the duties of people, essentially you have to build walls in your software development lifecycle, and that violates the whole automation and value stream engineering around the controls. Ending it, if you found it interesting, it's chapter 8 is a brief of this one. Thank you very much. Actually, it was a pleasure. And just remember that, because it's super important. If you play smart, compliance is a blessing. And I really mean it. I've done it 3 times. So it worked both 3 times equal if you played smart. That's all I had.
We can kick off the last Q&A. There are no questions in Slido, but if you have any, please shoot. I can give you a microphone, or you can just say it out loud. one appeared.
Yes, we have actually. What was the name of the person? Anonymous it is. Yes, we have actually in both three cases that I have. I can be open, right? It's on my LinkedIn profile. I've done it at Nordea and Danske Bank in the Nordics and Lloyds Bank in the UK. So basically, in cases that we didn't see the relevance, we did push back, but we didn't push back in the sense we're not doing it. You guys are not smart enough. We did provide them alternatives on how things can be done in different way. I can give you an example that was a real battlefield actually when I was at Nordea. They did ask us for pre-production environments across all the critical flows that they were identical to production. And simply we told them you will never get identical because we don't have money. If we are to build production again, it's going to take years and it's going to be too expensive. So basically what we convinced them to do is to build islands of pre-production environments. So we didn't cover the entire chain, never. So 4 or 5 applications with stubs, maintaining their own ecosystem, and only doing with really handcrafted critical flows, actually, not the entire thing of what they wanted. Similar topology to production, scaled down version, similar CI/CD capabilities, similar observability capabilities, similar autonomous operation capabilities, and eventually they did sign off on that. But if you read what they asked for at the beginning, it was way more different. It was way cheaper, slimmer, and easier to operate what we delivered. And it was a big battlefield actually. It was a battlefield within the bank to begin with. And we were a little bit revolutionary in markets, because markets is markets. People think are the most intelligent one in markets. That's true, actually, my experience working with banks. And we did have a lot of conflicts within the bank to eventually convince the regulator to go a different way. Now that's one of the many actually examples.
Any more questions?
Okay, question is how to manage if we have big database, yes, and we have automate deployment have, and how you in practice just copy this database to other environment, dev environment, test environment, staging environment. So how manage it?
I have a great story. Do we have time actually? I have a recent story from this one. We have 6 minutes. Lovely. So that story, let me brag a little bit about my clients actually. That's what we've done at Lloyds Bank last year. I'm gonna give you the context and you gotta tell me if it's similar to yours. So basically what they had to do, it was the insurance business. So basically they had different policies of their clients, and they had to prove to the regulator that they can do simulation of business development on those. So to prove them that they know what revenue they're planning to gain in the future, plus also to do exercises when the rates were changing from the FCA. So they can simulate the portfolio on how risky it is when rates are changing. The capability wasn't there. So what we have done, and we thought, again, we played smart. Regulatory requirement, yes, but be smart. We also had issues with fresh test data in the lower environments. We also have issues with production-like environments that the operations could replicate incidents. So basically what we have done, selective copy of production data. It wasn't a full copy because it wasn't needed. It was only 10,000 policies, so subsetting as it is called. Staging it in operational data storage. That was a production replica, again smaller. Applying different masking rules to the data because it was going to the lower environments based on the different scenario. So there was a scenario of rates testing for the regulators, fresh data for software development lifecycle, and production replica for IT operations. Transfer them securely through Connect Direct, which was a transmission channel approved by the bank to transfer data securely, and then basically deploy it into different targets asynchronously. Is there any close to what you're asking? That's what I've done it last year actually. It's really recent, this one. Very much correct. So basically, in most of the case, if you don't know the primary keys, to put it that way, you either build stubs or you complement the fresh production copy with synthetic data. At least that's how I've done it most of the times. So stubbing certain interfaces that give you reference keys, and then use synthetic data to mimic what is the real production reference keys from the different downstream and upstream systems. As an example. Production-like artificial data, which is not in production, but it does help you to connect the lines of the different sources. No, oh come on, we're 2025 soon. So basically the stubs is what we call a market trade canon. So it's a canon that bombards with trades the system. The synthetic data, there's many different tools actually that you can create it. It can even be, you know how we used to, in certain cases, create synthetic data and it was really proper data through regression test automation actually. So we were regression testing the system, it was giving results, and that was the synthetic data for the lower environment, as an example. Then it has to be, it is very close to the 10K policies example that I gave actually. So basically the thing is that it depends on the case, but what you're telling me now should be happening in the production-like environment. It shouldn't really be the lower ones. It can either be in banking, what I come across, we call it business development simulation. So it's not really lower one. What I want to say with this one, on that one, probably you can get bigger bulks. You don't really need to mask it because it's within the segregation of production. It makes life way easier with the example, the way you describe it.
And we have the last question.
The compliance requirement to pre-approve mission critical service to deploy. Many actually. I mean, if you look at the production readiness review, it can be everything from security engineering, quality engineering, observability, production likeliness of the environments that they have been tested with fresh test data, disaster recovery. Or if you look at the complete production, has anybody of you seen what you believe is a really complete production readiness review checklist? All the items in there have a corresponding regulatory requirement, one way or another, actually. So anything to answer this question, anything that is in the boundaries of security, compliance, and security, quality, and reliability, it is mandatory, especially when we talk about mission critical systems. And then you can even go to the big extremes now and find the discussions we are having in the UK, and I can tell you that openly nobody has managed to achieve it. Now that you even fail over from the data center of Google in Dublin to the one of Amazon. Even more extreme things for mission critical systems.
Great. So I would like to close the session,
yes.
And people could approach you at the Ask Me Anything corner. And then, yes, see you at the conference after party, which will be at Action by Apollo. So,
thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.